What do you do when you recognize your own daughter at a red light, begging for money with a baby in her arms? I had already given her a house and a car, so when she told me they were gone, I understood something was very wrong. What I did next wasn't loud, fast, or illegal, but it was final. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? The light was red at the corner of 5th and Monroe, the kind of busy intersection where nobody looks at anybody. I was tired after a 12-hour day inspecting boiler systems at a new apartment complex downtown. My truck smelled like metal and industrial grease. The radio was playing something soft, country maybe, and I wasn't really listening. I wasn't really looking either, not at first. There was a woman on the median, holding a cardboard sign. I've seen them before, we all have. You learn not to stare, you learn to check your phone or adjust your mirrors or pretend you're thinking about something important. That's what I was doing, pretending. But something made me look up. Maybe it was the way she moved, maybe it was the angle of her shoulders, or how she held the baby against her chest like she was protecting it from something invisible. I don't know. I just looked. And then I couldn't look away. The woman was my daughter. Irene, 32 years old, my only child, my little girl who used to sit on my lap while I explained how furnaces work. The same girl I walked down the aisle 5 years ago when she married Damon Hale. She was thin now, too thin. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a way that made her look older than she was. There were shadows under her eyes. Real shadows. The kind that come from not sleeping, from worrying, from something worse than I could imagine. The baby in her arms was my granddaughter, Lily, 11 months old. I'd only seen her 3 times. Damon always had some excuse for why they couldn't visit. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. My heart started beating in a strange rhythm, like it forgot what it was supposed to do. Irene turned toward my truck, and for a moment our eyes met through the windshield. Her face changed. Recognition first, then something else. Fear, maybe, or shame. She took a step back like she wanted to disappear into the exhaust fumes and honking traffic. I rolled down my window. My mouth was dry. Irene. That's all I said, just her name. But it came out rough, broken. She stood frozen on the median, cars rushing past on both sides. The baby made a small sound against her chest. "Dad," she whispered. I wasn't... Come here." My voice was steadier now, but only on the outside. Inside, everything was shaking. She looked left and right, hesitating. Then she crossed carefully between the stopped cars and stood beside my window. Up close, she looked even worse. Her clothes were wrinkled, clean but worn. There was a bruise on her wrist, faded yellow and green. I didn't ask about the bruise. Not yet. "The house," I said quietly. "The car. What happened?" She looked down. "They're gone, Dad. Everything's gone." "What do you mean gone?" Her lips trembled. "Damon. And his mother. They..." A car behind me honked. The light had turned green. I didn't move. "They what?" I signed papers. I didn't know what I was signing. I was so tired, and they kept saying it was normal, that it was just refinancing, just temporary. Another honk. Longer this time. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, something else. Something quieter and much more dangerous. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll handle it." The light was still green. Cars were swerving around me now. Drivers cursing through their windows. I didn't care. Irene's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you don't understand. They have lawyers. They have everything written down. It's legal. It's all legal." "Maybe." "Dad, get in the truck." She blinked. "What?" "Get in. Both of you. Right now." I reached over and opened the passenger door. She stood there for a moment, looking back at the median where she'd been standing with her cardboard sign. Then she climbed in, holding Tessa tight. I pulled forward through the intersection, ignoring the green light that was now turning yellow. My hands were still shaking. I pulled into a parking lot behind a closed hardware store and turned off the engine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Tessa made a soft gurgling sound. Irene bounced her gently, automatically. "How long?" I finally asked. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. "You've been on the street for a month?" "Not the street. I stayed with a friend for a while. But she couldn't... It was too much. I didn't want to call you. I was ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" "Of being stupid. Of trusting him. Of losing everything you gave me." I looked at her. Really looked. My daughter. The girl I raised alone after her mother passed when she was 9. The girl who used to help me organize receipts at the shop, who learned to read contracts before she learned to drive. And they had turned her into this, Damon and his mother. They had taken everything and left her begging at a traffic light. "You're not stupid," I said. "You were targeted." "What?" "This wasn't an accident, Irene. This was planned. From the beginning." She shook her head. "He loved me. In the beginning, he really did." "No. He loved what I gave you. The house. The car. The trust fund I set up when you were born." Her face went pale. "The trust fund? Is it gone too?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I nodded slowly. I should have felt angry, furious, but instead I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when you realize exactly what you need to do. "I'm going to take you home," I said. "To my house. You'll stay in the spare room. We'll get Tessa settled." "Dad, I can't." "You can, and you will." "But what about Damon? He'll come looking for me. He'll—" "Let him look." She stared at me. "What are you going to do?" I started the engine. What I should have done 3 years ago when he first showed up with that smile of his. "Dad, don't worry about Damon," I said, pulling out of the parking lot. "By the time I'm finished, he won't have anything left to threaten you with." Irene hugged Tessa closer. In the rearview mirror, I could see the intersection where I'd found her. The light was red again. Someone else's life was about to change there eventually. But mine had already changed, and I was ready. That night, after Irene and Tessa were settled in the spare room, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that I never drank. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think. I thought about how I'd met Damon Hale 5 years ago. He'd come to my office at the boiler company. Said he was interested in commissioning a system for a building his family was renovating downtown. He was smooth, confident. The kind of man who shakes your hand too firmly and looks you in the eye for too long. I should have known then. But I was distracted. Business was good, and I was thinking about expansion. And when he mentioned that he'd met my daughter at a charity event, that she was extraordinary. I felt proud instead of protective. A father's foolishness. I see that now. They married 8 months later. Fast, too fast, but Irene was happy. She smiled in ways I hadn't seen since her teenage years. How could I say no? The wedding was expensive. I paid for most of it. Damon's family offered, of course, they always offered, but somehow the bills always ended up in my mailbox. 6 months after the wedding, I gave Irene the house. It was a nice place in the suburbs, 3 bedrooms, a yard for future children. I put it in her name only, the way my lawyer suggested. A gift from father to daughter. Damon wasn't happy about that, I remember. He made a joke about trusting family, about old-fashioned arrangements. I should have listened to what he wasn't saying. A year later, the car. A good one, reliable and safe, also in her name. And then the changes started. Small at first. Irene called less. When she did call, there was always background noise, Damon's voice or his mother Marla's sharp laughter. Marla Hale. I'd met her at the wedding. A woman in her 60s who dressed younger and smiled colder. She'd looked at me like I was furniture. After dinner, I'd overheard her telling someone that my business was quaint. The way she'd said it made it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. Over the next 3 years, Irene drifted further away. Work kept me busy. I told myself she was just building her own life, that it was natural for daughters to pull back after marriage. But then there were the excuses. She couldn't come to Christmas because Damon's family had traditions. She couldn't visit on my birthday because Tessa was sick. She couldn't talk on the phone because there was always something, always some reason. And I believed every excuse, because they were easier than the truth. The next morning, I woke early. I found Irene in the kitchen feeding Tessa a bottle. "You don't have to sneak around," I said. "It's your house, too." She shook her head. "I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't." I poured coffee for both of us. "We need to talk about what happened, all of it." Irene's hand trembled slightly. "I don't know where to start." "The house. Start there." She took a breath. "About a year ago, Damon said we needed to refinance. Rising interest rates, he said. Standard adjustment." "Refinance how?" "He brought papers. A lot of papers. He said it was just updating the deed to include his name, that it would make everything easier. And you signed." I was so tired, Dad. Tessa wasn't sleeping. I was up all night, every night. Damon would bring the papers late when I could barely keep my eyes open. He'd say, "Just sign here, it's nothing." And I'd sign. I trusted him. I felt that cold feeling again. The calm before something final. "What about the car?" "Same thing. Different excuse. Something about insurance rates and joint ownership making the premiums lower." "And the trust fund?" Irene closed her eyes. That was Marla's idea. She said she knew an accountant who could double the returns. She said I was wasting money leaving it in the original fund. She said, her voice broke. She said you were incompetent, I finished for her, that I didn't understand modern finance, that her people could do better. Irene nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. And you gave her access. I gave Damon power of attorney. He was my husband. I thought... You thought he was protecting you? Yes. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. This wasn't your fault. They did this to you, deliberately. But I signed. You signed because they manipulated you into signing. There's a difference. Tessa finished her bottle and made a satisfied sound. Irene lifted her to her shoulder, patting her back gently. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. Do you trust me? She looked at me for a long moment. I don't trust anyone anymore. That's fair, but I need you to try, just for a little while. After Irene went back to her room, I drove across town to a small apartment complex where most of the units had 4 rent signs in the windows. Irene had told me this was where she'd been staying before the streets, a friend's place. But I wasn't here for the friend. I walked around the building, taking pictures from across the street. A car I recognized was parked in the lot, the same car I'd given to Irene 3 years ago. Except now it had different plates and a parking sticker from a different county. I wrote down the plate number and the sticker code. Then I drove to the old house in the suburbs. My house, the one I'd paid for. It looked different now. New paint, cream instead of the blue Irene had chosen, new landscaping. The mailbox had a different name on it. A family I didn't recognize was loading groceries from their car. I parked across the street and sat there for 10 minutes, watching. Everything I'd built. Everything I'd given my daughter. Gone. Not lost. Taken. I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months. Finn Harlow, my accountant. The man who'd helped me structure my business for 30 years. The man who knew where every dollar came from and where every dollar went. Grant, he answered on the second ring. It's been a while. I need your help, Finn. What happened? Someone stole from my daughter. I need to know exactly what they took and exactly how they did it. There was a pause. How bad is it? Bad enough that she was begging at a traffic light when I found her. Another pause, longer this time. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring every document you have from the original gifts. I will. And Grant. Yes? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's clean. I looked at the house one more time. The family was inside now. Lights were turning on in windows that used to be Irene's. It will be clean, I said. I promise. I ended the call and started the engine. The sun was setting behind the rooftops, painting everything in shades of red and gold. Somewhere across town, Damon Hale was probably eating dinner and laughing about how easily everything had gone. He wouldn't be laughing much longer. The next morning, I went to the auto service lot first. It was a municipal facility, the kind of place where they process vehicle transfers and update registrations. Institutional carpet, buzzing fluorescent lights, a short line of people who all looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I took a number and waited. When my turn came, I walked to the counter and handed the clerk a piece of paper with a plate number written on it. I need transfer history for this vehicle, I said. The clerk was young, bored. He barely looked at the paper. Ownership inquiry? You need to be the registered owner or have authorization. I'm the original purchaser. I have the original receipt. That got his attention. He looked up, squinting at me through glasses that were too large for his face. Original purchaser is different from current owner. I know. You understand I can't just give you records from... I'm not asking for records, I said calmly. I'm asking for public transfer history. Date of last title transfer and county of registration. That's public information. He hesitated, then typed something into his computer. After a moment, he turned the screen slightly so I could see. Last transfer was 8 months ago. New registration is in Wallace County. That's up north. Different jurisdiction. Name on the new registration? He shook his head. That part isn't public. You'd need a court order or law enforcement request. I didn't need the name. I already knew it. But now I had the date and location. Thank you, I said. You've been very helpful. From the auto service lot, I drove to Finn Harlow's office. Finn worked out of a building that hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Wood paneling, brass fixtures, filing cabinets that went floor to ceiling. He'd had opportunities to move to fancier spaces over the years, but he preferred things the way they were. Old systems work, he used to say. New systems just hide the same problems in shinier boxes. He was waiting for me when I walked in, coffee already poured. "Shut the door," he said. I did. Then I sat down and put a folder on his desk. Original gift deeds for the house and car, the trust documents I'd set up when Irene was born, and the power of attorney form she'd signed 3 years ago. Finn put on his reading glasses and went through everything slowly. He didn't say anything for almost 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. "They didn't make mistakes," he said. This was professional. "What do you mean?" He spread the papers out. The gift deeds were structured with reversion clauses. Standard stuff. If the property is transferred without your consent within 10 years, it reverts to you automatically. Your lawyer was good. But they found a loophole. Irene signed a quitclaim deed, not a standard transfer. Technically, she didn't transfer the property. She surrendered her claim to it. Different legal category. That cancels the reversion clause? In theory. In practice. He smiled slightly. In practice, quitclaim deeds require informed consent, and the notary who witnessed the signing has to verify that consent was given freely and without duress. Can we prove it wasn't? We can try. More importantly, we can question whether the notary followed proper procedure. If they didn't, the entire quitclaim becomes challengeable. He flipped to another document. The power of attorney. This is where they really made their move. Once Damon had power of attorney, he could act on Irene's behalf for financial transactions. That's how they emptied the trust fund. Legally, he was her. Is there a way to challenge that? Yes. Power of attorney can be revoked at any time by the grantor. They didn't file the revocation paperwork, but that doesn't mean a revocation didn't happen. I frowned. It didn't happen. Finn looked at me over his glasses. Are you sure about that? Maybe Irene revoked it verbally, but didn't file the papers. Maybe she wrote a letter that got lost. Maybe there's documentation somewhere that nobody found yet. I understood what he was saying. He wasn't suggesting we lie. He was suggesting we look harder. What about the house? I asked. The house is more complicated. It's been sold to a third party. Innocent buyers who did nothing wrong. We can't just take it back. Then what can we do? We can trace the proceeds. When the house was sold, the money went somewhere. If that money can be tracked to Damon and Marla, we can file for recovery. And if it can't be tracked? Finn smiled again. Not a happy smile, but a knowing one. There are other approaches. The original gift had strings attached. Conditions you probably forgot about. I leaned forward. What conditions? He pulled out the original gift deed and pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. This clause right here. It states that the property was given conditionally upon Irene maintaining residence as her primary dwelling. If she ceased to live there without written notification to you, the gift becomes revocable. But she did live there for years. She stopped living there when they forced her onto the streets, and they never notified you, which means technically they violated the conditions of the gift. I read the clause again, slowly. My lawyer had put this in as a precaution years ago. I'd forgotten it was there. This gives us standing, Finn continued. We can argue that the gift was voided by their actions before the quitclaim was ever signed, which would make their later transfers invalid from the start. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief and not hope exactly. Something sturdier than both. A quiet certainty settling into place like a foundation finally set after months of unstable ground. What do you need from me? I asked. Finn didn't answer right away. He studied me the way surgeons do before deciding where to cut. Time, documentation, and patience, he said at last. This has to be done correctly, Grant. If we move too fast, they'll sense it. People like Damon always do. Once that happens, they'll start covering tracks, hiding assets, rewriting narratives. How much time? I asked. 2 weeks, possibly 3, he replied. Yeah, I need to trace the financial trail properly and prepare the paperwork so nothing can be challenged later. I nodded. I didn't like the timeline, but I understood it. And Irene? I asked. Does she need to do anything right now? Finn's expression tightened slightly. She needs to stay out of sight, he said. If Damon finds out where she is, he may try to pressure her into signing additional documents. Or worse, he could claim she abandoned the marriage. That would complicate custody of the baby, and he knows it. I won't let that happen, I said immediately. I'll protect her. Finn gathered the papers from his desk, squared them carefully, and locked them into his filing cabinet with deliberate precision. One more thing, he said, turning back to me. The trust fund, the way it was drained, it wasn't sloppy, it wasn't emotional, it was calculated. I looked at him. Meaning? Meaning they knew exactly what they were doing, he said, and whoever advised them has done this before. This wasn't a first attempt. A chill ran through me. So you think... I think Damon and Marla may not be first-time offenders, Finn finished. If we can identify other people they've done this to, the pattern strengthens our case considerably. I stood, slipping my coat on. I'll keep my eyes open. And Grant? I paused at the door. I've seen this stage before, Finn said, his voice quieter now. In other clients. The anger sharpens everything. It makes you feel focused, powerful, but it doesn't fade on its own. I turned slightly, listening. You're not a young man anymore, he continued. You can't afford mistakes. Channel it. Don't rush. Precision matters more than speed. I don't intend to make any mistakes, I said. I stepped outside into the sunlight, the door closing softly behind me. The city moved on around me, cars passing, people talking, nothing aware of what had just been set in motion. 2 weeks, maybe 3. It felt endless, heavy, like standing at the edge of something that demanded patience instead of action. But I'd waited longer for things that mattered far less. This time, waiting wouldn't be weakness. This time, waiting would be worth it. Over the next 10 days, I did 3 things. I protected my daughter, I gathered information, and I prepared for what was coming. Irene stayed at my house, rarely leaving. She was recovering, slowly but visibly. The shadows under her eyes began to fade. She ate regular meals, she slept through the night sometimes, but she was still afraid. Every time a car drove past the house, she tensed. Every time the phone rang, she flinched. I didn't tell her what I was planning, not yet. She had enough to worry about. During the days, I worked. My business didn't stop just because my life had fallen apart. Boilers still needed servicing, contracts still needed signing. I had employees who depended on their paychecks. But in the evenings, after everyone went home, I sat in my office and did different work. I went through my files, every document from the past 10 years. Every contract with Damon's name on it, every interaction I could remember. The pattern became clearer the more I looked. Damon had been preparing for this almost from the beginning. The first hint was a small loan he'd requested 6 months after the wedding, just to cover unexpected expenses, he'd said. Irene had asked me to help, and I'd written a check without thinking twice. That loan was never repaid. Then there were the investment opportunities Marla kept mentioning, tech startups, real estate ventures, things that sounded impressive but never materialized. I declined most of them. But Irene had signed up for a few. Small amounts, she'd thought. Except the amounts added up over time. And then the big moves. The house transfer, the car, the trust fund. Each step had seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a systematic extraction of everything my daughter owned. At the end of the first week, Finn called. I found something, he said. I drove to his office immediately. He was waiting with a thick folder and a worried expression. The trust fund, he said. I traced where the money went. And? Some of it went to pay off debts. Damon had significant outstanding obligations, credit cards, a defaulted business loan, back taxes on a property in Wallace County. The same county where the car is registered. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. A large portion of the money, about 60%, was transferred to an account in Marla Hale's name, an investment account. She has my daughter's money. She claims she's protecting it. The account is set up as a family trust with Damon as beneficiary. I felt my jaw tighten. Can we get it back? We can try, but first, look at this. He handed me a printout, bank records from the investment account. See these transactions? Regular withdrawals, all cash. Some of them match dates when Marla made major purchases, a new car for herself, renovation work on a property she owns, travel expenses. She's been spending the money, spending it and hiding it, but not very well. He smiled slightly. She used the same bank for personal and trust accounts, left a trail a mile wide. I looked at the numbers. My daughter's inheritance, my daughter's security, flowing into Marla Hale's lifestyle while Irene begged on a street corner. What else? I asked. Finn pulled out another document. I found something on the house, the quitclaim deed that Irene signed. The notary who witnessed it is named Victor Bell. He's been involved in questionable transactions before. Nothing proven, but he's flagged in several complaint files. Questionable how? Witnesses who say they never signed what they're accused of signing. Elderly clients who claim documents were altered after the fact. Pattern of working with a small group of attorneys who specialize in disputed property transfers. One of those attorneys works for Damon. Finn nodded. Lawrence Tipton. He filed the paperwork for both the house and the car transfers. He also helped set up Marla's investment account. I sat back in my chair, processing everything. This wasn't just wrongdoing, it was an operation, a system built to methodically take advantage of vulnerable people, draining their assets layer by layer, document by document. And my daughter had been caught in it. Can we undo this? I asked. We can try. But Grant, and I need you to hear this clearly, we can't just file papers and hope for the best. The people involved will fight back. They'll claim Irene consented to everything. They'll produce documents we've never seen. They'll tie this up in motions and counter-motions for years. So, what do you recommend? Finn handed me a final document, a legal filing form. There's a municipal procedure for disputing property transfers on grounds of improper notarization. It's rarely used because it requires the original gift giver to appear in person and testify about their intent. I can do that? I know, but here's the thing. This procedure is public. It happens in a civil office on the record. Once you file, everyone involved will be notified. They'll have to appear. You mean Damon and Marla will be there? Yes, and they won't be happy. I looked at the form. Simple language, clear requirements. A date and time to be determined. Schedule it, I said. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Finn nodded slowly. I'll need about a week to prepare the paperwork. Can you have Irene ready to appear as a witness? She'll be ready. I stood up to leave, already reaching for my coat, when Finn raised his hand slightly, stopping me. One more thing, he said. I turned back. I reached out to someone who might be useful, he continued. A document specialist. Her name is Veda Talrin. She's worked fraud cases before. Corporate, family trusts, forged agreements. She knows how to tell when paperwork has been altered, rushed, or manufactured after the fact. I considered that. Can she be trusted? Finn didn't hesitate. She's neutral. She doesn't take sides. She follows the evidence wherever it leads, even when people don't like the answer. That's exactly what we need right now. I nodded slowly. Neutral meant predictable. Predictable meant safe. Good, I said. Let me know when she's ready. Finn gave a short nod in return. That was all that needed to be said. I thanked him and walked out into the parking lot. The sun was bright, almost harsh, reflecting off the asphalt and forcing me to squint. I paused for a moment before getting into the car, breathing in the cold air. Everything felt different, sharper, more defined, as if the haze I'd been living in for months had finally lifted, replaced by something steadier. Focus. Direction. For the first time in a long while, my thoughts weren't scattered. 1 week. That was all I had to wait. And when that week was over, there would be no more speculation. No more half-truths or carefully rehearsed explanations. Everyone would see exactly what Damon Hale and his mother had done. The days passed slowly. I kept working. I kept watching over Irene. I kept my anger buried deep, where nobody could see it. But at night, when the house was quiet, I let myself remember. I remembered the first time I met Marla Hale. She'd looked at my hands, workers' hands, scarred from years of mechanical work, and smiled in a way that made it clear she found them distasteful. You do this yourself? She'd asked, pointing at a callus on my palm. How? Dedicated. She'd said dedicated, like it was a disease. I remembered a family dinner 2 years ago. Christmas at Damon's apartment, everyone around the table, pretending to be happy. Marla had made a comment about my business. Boilers, she'd said, rolling the word around like something bitter. I suppose someone has to keep the pipes running. Irene had tried to defend me. Dad's company is very successful. He's been in business for 30 years. Marla had laughed. Success is relative, dear. Some people measure it in units of water pressure. Others measure it in... She gestured around the expensive apartment. In other ways. Damon had changed the subject quickly, but I'd seen the look on his face. He hadn't disagreed with his mother. He'd just been embarrassed that she'd said it out loud. That was the night I should have realized what they thought of me. Not a father-in-law, a resource. A bank account with legs. I remembered the last time I saw Irene before the traffic light. It was 8 months ago. She'd stopped by my office unexpectedly, said she wanted to show me pictures of Lily. But something had been wrong. Her hands shook when she handed me her phone. Her voice was too bright, too cheerful, like she was performing a part. Are you okay? I'd asked. Fine. Everything's fine. Damon sends his love? Damon had never sent me anything but requests. If you need help, I'd started. She'd cut me off. We're doing great, Dad. Really, I should go. And she'd left. Quickly. Too quickly. I'd told myself she was just busy, just overwhelmed with the baby, just going through normal marriage stress. But now I knew the truth. She'd been drowning, and she'd come to me hoping I'd see it without her having to say it. and I'd missed it completely. That failure haunted me more than anything else. I was her father. It was my job to protect her, and I'd let her slip through my fingers while I counted inventory and inspected heating systems. Never again. On the 5th day, I got a call from Finn. "The hearing is scheduled," he said. "Next Thursday, 2 o'clock, Municipal Civil Office on 4th Street. "Did you notify them?" "The notification went out this morning. Damon Hale and Marla Hale are required to appear as respondents. Lawrence Tipton has been notified as their attorney of record. And Victor Bell, the notary? He's been subpoenaed as a witness. He can't refuse without contempt charges." I felt something release in my chest. We were moving now, finally moving. "What about Veda Talrin?" "She'll be there. I met with her yesterday. She's reviewed all the documents and prepared a detailed analysis. Grant, when she testifies, Damon won't have anywhere to hide." "Good." I paused. "Has there been any response from their side?" "Not yet, but I expect we'll hear from Tipton soon. He'll probably try to delay, file motions, make this as complicated as possible." "Let him try." That night, I told Irene. She was sitting in the kitchen, feeding Tessa pureed vegetables. She looked up when I walked in. "There's a hearing next Thursday," I said. "I need you to be there, to testify." Her face went pale. "Testify about what?" "About what they did. How they pressured you. How they took everything." "Dad, I can't." "You can, and you will." She shook her head, eyes wide. "You don't understand. If I go there, if I say those things publicly, Damon will—" "What? What will Damon do?" She didn't answer. "Irene, look at me." Slowly, she raised her eyes. "He can't hurt you anymore. Not after Thursday. I've made sure of that." "How? Trust me." She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll be there." I put my hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think. You just forgot it for a while, but I remember." She started to cry then. Not the quiet tears I'd seen before, but real sobbing. Years of fear and shame pouring out all at once. I held her until she stopped. Lily in her high chair watched us with curious eyes. "Your grandfather is going to fix everything," I whispered to her. "Just watch." The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. I dressed carefully. Clean suit, the good one, polished shoes, a tie Irene had given me for my birthday years ago. This wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a statement. I wanted them to see me clearly, not the worker they'd dismissed, but the man who'd spent a lifetime building things that lasted. Irene was already in the kitchen when I came down. She was dressed too, simple clothes, modest. She'd put makeup on, carefully, trying to hide the signs of stress. "Are you ready?" I asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Remember what we discussed? Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." We drove downtown in silence. To Sawa's with a neighbor, someone I trusted, someone who wouldn't talk. The Municipal Civil Office was a plain government building, nothing remarkable. The kind of place where people filed permits and contested parking tickets. Today, though, it would be something more. Finn was waiting in the lobby. He shook my hand firmly. "They're already here," he said. Tipton arrived early, tried to file a last-minute motion for continuance. The clerk rejected it. "Good." Veda Talrin is upstairs, reviewing the exhibits. Victor Bell hasn't arrived yet. He has until 2 o'clock. I checked my watch. 40 minutes. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where a small room had been set aside for the hearing. Metal chairs, a long table, windows facing a brick wall. Lawrence Tipton was already seated at the table. He was older than I expected. Gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of face that looked reasonable and spoke unreasonable things. He stood when we entered. "Mr. Solon, I hoped we could speak privately before the proceedings." "No." He blinked. "I understand emotions are running high, but there may be room for—" I said no. Tipton sat back down, his expression carefully neutral. The door opened again. Damon walked in. He looked exactly the same as always. Confident, well-dressed, a smile that showed too many teeth. When he saw Irene, his expression shifted for just a moment, something darker underneath. Then it was gone, replaced by concern. "Irene, sweetheart, I've been worried about you." She didn't answer. She moved closer to me, instinctively. Behind Damon came Marla Hale. If Damon looked comfortable, his mother looked annoyed. She swept into the room like she was doing everyone a favor by appearing. Her eyes landed on me, assessed, dismissed. "This is a waste of everyone's time," she said to Tipton. "My son has done nothing wrong." "Mother," Damon started. "Your son has stolen my daughter's property," I said quietly. "And you helped him do it." Marla turned her gaze to me, full power now, no politeness. Stolen? We helped your daughter manage her finances because she was incapable of doing so herself. If anyone is to blame for her current situation, it's you, filling her head with ideas above her station. Above her station? You gave her a house she couldn't maintain, a car she couldn't afford to insure, a trust fund she had no idea how to invest. What did you expect would happen? I felt Finn's hand on my arm. Steady. That's quite a perspective, Mrs. Hale, Finn said calmly. I'm sure the hearing officer will find it very interesting. The door opened again. A government official entered, middle-aged, tired-looking, carrying a stack of folders. Behind her came Victor Bell, the notary. He looked nervous. And behind him was Veda Talrin. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, hair pulled back tightly, glasses perched on her nose. She carried a briefcase that looked heavy. Everyone please take your seats, the official said. We're ready to begin. The hearing started with formalities. Names recorded, positions stated, procedural rules explained. Then Finn presented our case. He spoke for almost an hour. Documents were entered into evidence. Timelines were established. Patterns were demonstrated. I watched Damon's face throughout. He maintained his composure at first, nodding along like this was all a misunderstanding that would soon be cleared up. But as Finn continued, small changes appeared. A tightening around the eyes, a shifting in his seat, a glance toward Tipton that wasn't returned. Marla, beside him, stayed rigid. Whatever she was feeling, she refused to show it. When it was Irene's turn to testify, she stood slowly. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She described 3 years of gradual control. Decisions taken from her hands. Papers pushed in front of her late at night, when she was exhausted from caring for the baby. Promises that everything was normal, everything was fine, everything would work out. She described the day she realized the house was gone. I came home, she said, and there was a notice on the door, from a real estate company. They were showing the property to buyers. I didn't understand. I thought there was a mistake. What happened when you asked your husband about it? Finn asked. He said the house had been sold. He said we needed the money. He said he'd explained it all before, but I must have forgotten because I was so tired with the baby. Did you remember him explaining it? No, he never explained anything. He just handed me papers and told me to sign. Damon shifted in his seat again. Tipton whispered something to him. And the trust fund? Finn continued. Irene's voice dropped. Same thing, papers, late nights, promises that it was all normal. And then, one day, it was empty. Who told you it was empty? Marla. She called me, very friendly, very casual. She said, Don't worry about the investment account. I'm handling everything for you now. But when I asked how much was in it, she laughed and said, Honey, there's nothing left. But that's what happens when you don't pay attention to your own money. The hearing officer looked up from her notes. Her expression was difficult to read, but there was something there, recognition, maybe, or disgust. When Irene finished, Veda Talrin took the stand. She was clinical, precise. Her testimony was about documents, not emotions. She explained how signatures had been obtained without proper witnessing, how notarization procedures had been violated, how transfer paperwork had been backdated to avoid certain legal protections. She showed comparison charts. Original documents from when I first gave Irene the house, placed next to the quitclaim deed that transferred it away. The differences were subtle, but damning. This signature, Veda said, pointing to a line on one document, was traced from another source. You can see the hesitation marks here and here, inconsistent with natural handwriting. Victor Bell, the notary, went pale in his seat. And this date stamp, she continued, indicates the document was processed on a Tuesday. However, the notary's own office records show he was out of state that entire week, attending a conference. The room was very quiet. In my professional opinion, Veda concluded, these documents show a pattern of systematic fraud. Signatures obtained under duress or falsified entirely. Notarization procedures ignored or fabricated. Transfer paperwork constructed to withdraw assets from a vulnerable individual without proper consent. Tipton tried to object. The hearing officer waved him off. Save it for your response, counselor. I want to hear this. Veda continued for another 30 minutes. By the end, Victor Bell had his head in his hands. When she finished, the hearing officer looked at Damon and Marla. Do you wish to respond? Damon started to stand, but Tipton grabbed his arm. They had a brief, whispered argument. Finally, Tipton spoke. My clients maintain that all transactions were conducted with full consent and proper authorization. We reject the characterization of Mr. Tipton, the hearing officer cut in. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I recognize a pattern when I see one. She shuffled through her papers. Based on the evidence presented, I'm prepared to issue a preliminary finding that the property transfers in question were improperly executed and are therefore voidable. Marla stood up suddenly. This is absurd. That woman, she pointed at Irene, signed everything willingly. We have witnesses. Ma'am, please sit down. I will not sit down. My family has been dragged here on the word of an ungrateful daughter and a bitter old mechanic who thinks money gives him the right to... Mrs. Hale, sit down. Something in the officer's tone made Marla pause. She sat, slowly, still glaring. As I was saying, the officer continued, the preliminary finding supports the petitioner's claim. However, full resolution will require additional proceedings to determine restitution and potential referral to criminal authorities. Damon's face went white. Criminal authorities? Tipton asked. Yes. The evidence suggests potential violations of several statutes regarding property fraud, elder financial abuse, given the circumstances around the trust fund, and notary misconduct. I looked at Damon. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't confident or charming or any of the things he'd always pretended to be. He was afraid. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out over days and weeks of preparation. What remained was colder, clearer. Justice. After the hearing, things moved quickly. Victor Bell, the notary, broke first. Before the hearing was even officially adjourned, he was already asking to speak with investigators. He had records, he said. He had dates and names. He could explain exactly who had asked him to do what. Damon tried to control the situation. He pulled Tipton aside, speaking urgently. But Tipton was already stepping back, hands up, the way lawyers do when they realize their client might be about to drag them down too. Marla stood in the hallway, alone, watching her carefully constructed world begin to collapse. She looked at me once, a long, hard look full of something I couldn't quite name. Contempt, maybe, or fear dressed up as contempt. I looked back, said nothing, there was nothing left to say. Finn walked me to the elevator. The restitution process will take time, he said. But the preliminary finding means everything those transfers are frozen. Damon can't touch any of those assets now. Not the house sale proceeds, not the car, not what's left of the trust fund. And Marla's accounts? Once Belle starts talking, those will be frozen too. She used those funds for personal expenses. That's conversion of assets at minimum, potentially something worse. The elevator doors opened. Irene was inside, already waiting. Her face was different now, lighter, like something heavy had been lifted. Is it over? She asked. Not yet, I said, but the hard part is done. We drove home in silence again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not fearful, not tense, just quiet. When we got back to the house, the neighbor brought Tessa over. Irene held her daughter for a long time, not speaking. I went to my office and sat at my desk. On the wall was a photograph from years ago, me and my wife and baby Irene, all of us smiling at something off camera. My wife had been gone for more than 20 years now. Breast complications, the doctors had said. A soft word for a hard thing. After she passed, I'd made myself a promise. I would keep Irene safe. I would give her everything I could. I would make sure she never felt alone the way I did in those dark months after the funeral. I'd tried. I'd given her money and property and opportunity, but I'd missed the most important thing. I'd missed the signs when she needed me most. Today, I'd fix that. The phone rang. It was Finn. Bell is cooperating fully, he said. He's given investigators names of 6 other families that Damon and Marla targeted over the past 8 years. Same pattern. Isolated vulnerable family members, pressured signatures, transferred assets. Other families? Yes. Once this comes out, the criminal case will be significant. I sat back in my chair. 6 other families. 6 other daughters or sons or grandparents, left with nothing by people who smiled the entire time. And now it was coming to a close. Not with force, not with raised voices, just paperwork, sworn statements, and the slow, grinding process of accountability finally catching up. Thank you, Finn, for everything. Don't thank me yet. The civil recovery will take months, maybe longer, but at least your daughter is protected now. That's all that matters. After I hung up, I went to the kitchen. Irene was there, feeding Tessa again. Mashed carrots this time. Tessa seemed to enjoy making a mess. Dad? Yes? I never said it. Thank you. I sat down across from her. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have been angry at me for being stupid, for falling for his lies, for... Stop. She fell silent. You weren't stupid. You trusted someone who claimed to love you. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. She started to cry again, quieter this time. The only person who should be ashamed, I continued, is him and his mother, and everyone who helped them. Lily, apparently unimpressed by the emotional moment, threw a spoonful of carrots at the wall. We both stared at the orange smear for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, we laughed. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard Irene laugh. It was probably the best sound in the world. 2 weeks after the hearing, I got an invitation. It came through a lawyer, not Tipton, who had formally withdrawn from representing Damon. This was someone new, someone young, probably cheap, the kind of attorney who takes clients nobody else wants, hoping to make a name or at least pay the bills. Damon wanted to meet, privately, to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution. I knew what that meant. He wanted to bargain, to negotiate, to find some way to escape the consequences closing in around him. I should have said no. Any reasonable man would have said no, but I wasn't feeling reasonable. I was feeling something else, something that had been building for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I said yes, but I chose the location. The meeting happened at my company's warehouse, industrial space, filled with boiler components and piping systems and decades of accumulated equipment. Steel shelving units rose to the ceiling, overhead lights cast shadows between the rows of inventory. The whole place smelled like metal and work. I'd spent my life in places like this. Every scratch on the floor, every dent in the shelving. They told stories of jobs completed, problems solved, systems built that would keep running long after I was gone. This was my territory, and Damon was about to enter it. He arrived alone, which surprised me. I'd expected him to bring his cheap lawyer, or maybe even Marla, but he walked in by himself, looking around at the warehouse with barely concealed disdain. Some things never change. Interesting location, he said. I didn't know you still spent time here. I spend time wherever my business needs me. He nodded, trying to look casual. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. The confidence that had always been his armor was cracking. Grant, he started. Can I call you Grant? I feel like we should be past formalities by now. Call me whatever you want. It won't change anything. He paused, recalibrating. Look, I know things have gotten complicated, but I came here because I believe we can still work this out. Between family. We're not family. The words hung in the air. Damon took a breath. Irene is still my wife. Tessay's still my daughter. That doesn't just disappear because of some paperwork dispute. Paperwork dispute. I let the word sit. Is that what you call it? I call it a misunderstanding. Some financial decisions that maybe weren't communicated as clearly as they should have been. I'm willing to admit that. I could have been more transparent. I walked slowly through the warehouse, stopping beside a row of vintage boiler components. Some of them had been here since my father's time. This business was older than Damon's entire life. The investigators found 6 other families, I said. Did you know that? 6 families you and your mother systematically defrauded over the past 8 years? Damon's expression flickered. I don't know what you're talking about. There was an elderly couple in Warren County. You convinced them to refinance their home to invest in one of Marla's schemes. They lost everything. They spent their last years in a rental apartment, wondering how they'd been so stupid. There was a single mother in Middleton. Her brother introduced her to Marla at a charity event. The same kind of event where you met Irene, by the way. Within 2 years, her savings were gone. Her car was gone. Her credit was destroyed. These are allegations. Nothing has been proven. Victor Bell is proving them right now. Every document you ever asked him to notarize, every signature you harvested while people were exhausted or confused or trusting, every backdated form, every altered record. I turned to face him directly. He's giving investigators everything. For the first time, I saw real fear in Damon's eyes. Bell is trying to save himself, he said quickly. He'll say anything to avoid prosecution. That doesn't mean... And Lawrence Tipton dropped you. Your own lawyer looked at the evidence and decided he didn't want any part of what's coming. Damon's jaw tightened. Tipton was always a coward. Tipton was smart enough to know when a ship is sinking. There was a long silence. In the warehouse, metal shifted and settled. Somewhere outside, a truck rumbled past. Damon's posture changed. The negotiating facade fell away, replaced by something harder. What do you want, Grant? You want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how things turned out. But you need to understand. I was trying to provide for my family. Your daughter included. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. You didn't make difficult decisions. You made criminal ones. Criminal is a strong word. It's the accurate word. He stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but not casual either. You think you've won something here, he said. You think dragging this into court, filing papers, getting officials involved, you think that makes you the hero. I don't care about being a hero. Then what do you care about? I looked at him steadily. I care about my daughter never having to stand on a street corner again. I care about my granddaughter growing up in a safe home. I care about every other family you might have targeted next. So righteous, so self-satisfied. Damon's voice was bitter now. You know what your problem is, Grant. You never understood how the world works. You sat in your little warehouse, building your little boilers, thinking you were doing something important. But the truth is, you were always just a small man with small dreams. I let him finish. And Marla? I asked quietly. What happens to her now? The question caught him off guard. What? Your mother, the woman who organized all of this, who set up the investment accounts, recruited Victor Bell, identified the targets. What happens to her when the criminal investigation reaches its conclusion? Damon's face paled slightly. My mother is a respected... Your mother is facing felony charges for financial fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy. The accounts she set up have been frozen. The cash she withdrew is being traced. And the other victims, those 6 families I mentioned, they're coming forward now, building a case. I walked to a workbench and picked up a thick folder. I'd prepared it for this moment. These are preliminary findings from the investigators. Copies, of course. The originals are safely documented. Want to know what they found? Damon didn't answer. His hands were clenched at his sides. They found that Marla has been doing this for over 20 years, before you were even involved. You learned it from her. This is the family business you grew up in. That's not... And now it's over. I set the folder back down. All of it. The properties your mother thought she owned free and clear, challenged. The investment accounts, frozen. Your access to any of it, gone. You can't do this. I didn't do it. You did. I just made sure someone was watching. Damon stared at me. The fear was fully visible now, no longer hidden. Irene will come back to me, he said finally. She loves me. She'll remember what we had, and she'll... No, she won't. You can't speak for her. I don't have to. The restraining order was filed yesterday. You come within 500 feet of her or Lily, and you'll be arrested. His face went completely white. You filed a restraining order? She filed it. I just helped with the paperwork. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Damon laughed. It was a strange sound, harsh, broken. You think this is over, he said. You think you've beaten us. But people like you don't beat people like me, Grant. We have resources, connections, ways of making things complicated. You have a cheap lawyer and a mother facing federal charges. Your connections are running as fast as they can in the other direction. I walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. This meeting is over. Don't contact me again. Don't contact Irene. Don't try to see Lily. Or what? I stopped at the door and looked back at him. Or you find out what 30 years of building systems has taught me about taking them apart. I walked out into the sunlight. Behind me, Damon stood alone in the warehouse, surrounded by machines he didn't understand, facing a future he couldn't control. It felt like justice. No, it was justice. The final hearing took place on a Thursday morning. Municipal Civil Office. 3rd floor. Same room where everything had started. Damon sat alone at the respondent's table with his cheap young lawyer. Marla wasn't there. Federal investigators had already frozen her accounts and seized her properties. I sat with Irene and Finn at the petitioner's table. The hearing officer entered and reviewed her documents. Based on the evidence submitted, this office finds the following. The property transfers executed in Irene Solin's name were obtained through improper means, including falsified notarization and documents signed under duress. The original gift conditions remain binding. The house, car, and trust fund assets revert to Irene Solin. Damon stood up. This is... Mr. Hale, sit down. You're taking everything from me based on the word of a bitter old man, and... Sit down, now. He sat. Additionally, funds withdrawn by Marla Hale constitute conversion of assets. A recovery order will be issued requiring full restitution. She paused. This office is referring the complete file to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. Mr. Hale, I strongly advise you to retain criminal defense counsel. She gathered her papers and left. Damon's lawyer whispered something urgent. They moved toward the exit. At the door, Damon stopped and looked back at me. A long, bitter look, full of everything he wanted to say and couldn't. I met his eyes without flinching. He walked out. I stood, took Irene's hand, and we followed. Through the hallway, down the elevator, into the sunlight. The doors closed behind us.